have trouble layering gouache? Do you layer colors and colors until you get mud and all you can do is throw away your painting? Maybe I can help. I have some tips for you about what to do and what to avoid when you are layering with gouache paint. And to show you this, I will be painting this adorable puffin in two versions. One you should do and one you should avoid if you want to have a successful painting. Bonjour, I'm Cécile, a French artist, and my mission is to help you becoming a better artist and today especially a better gouache painter. Let's go. When you apply a color on top of a previous layer of gouache, you don't want to rub with your brush, just like what I'm doing right now, because the more you rub, the more you will lift up the color below. So try to apply this with a single brush stroke as much as possible. Here, of course, I am exaggerating a bit by rubbing and rubbing and rubbing. And of course, it gets a nice cloud that is integrated in the background, but it will never be white if I keep on painting this way. To make white clouds, you need to work in layers. The first one will be a bit rubbed on the background, so it's a bit integrated inside. And then, when it's dry, I will be able to add a second layer on top of it. By doing so, you are sure that your top white will be the whitest white possible. That's a lot of white in the same sentence. One tip that is really important is to increase the consistency of your layers. Here I'm placing a first layer in a thick consistency, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, I will send you to my other video where I talk about gouache consistency. It's linked under this video in the description box. Here I'm using a really thick consistency. It's so thick that it can barely feel all the bumps in the paper. By the way, I'm using a watercolor paper called Press 300 GSM, so it can handle a lot of water. On top of this thick layer, I will now add a very watery layer. And this is exactly what you should not do, because if you decrease the consistency, you will get mud. This is where you get the muddy colors, because you are rubbing a liquid consistency on top of a thick one, and all you do is lift up the pigments below. To get a nice even background, you need to increase the consistency of your layers. And the first layer needs to be very liquid, very watery. Look how the paint is floating on the paper, and this way I can rub with the edge of the previous layer on what is supposed to be the valley maybe, and add a lot of paint everywhere. And as long as I am painting, I will slightly increase the consistency of my layer by adding a tiny bit more gouache or a tiny less water. It depends how you see the things. This way, instead of lifting up the pigments below, you are mixing them with the upper layer. It's something that is really specific to gouache, but the pigments are really soaking into each other, making a nice color. Of course, if you are trying to mix opposite colors, you will get mud anyway. But here I'm trying to have some variety in my greens, my browns, etc. And this way it's really integrating very well with no harsh edges. And then I know I can go on top and fix everything if needed. If you want your layers to be really opaque and to cover the color behind, what you need to do is use opaque pigments, and they are not all opaque. For this, you need to check out on the tube the symbol of the opacity. If it's filled, it's opaque. If it's empty, it's transparent. If it's half empty, it's somewhere between, and whites don't have all the same opacity. So for a really white cloud, you should be using an opaque white. Usually titanium white or permanent white are really opaque, but you have to check it because it depends on the brands. Yeah, I know, why being simple if you can do it complicated? This is by using an opaque white that you will be able to get the perfect white in the highlights, like here on the chest of the puffin. Did you know this tip? Is it helpful for you? Please boop the like button so more people can see this video. It really helps. Merci. If you want to add texture on top of a dry layer of paint, you can use a very, very dry brush with very few water, almost nothing, and just dab into the paint. Even you can just wipe off a bit of the humidity in the brush on a rag or something. And if you apply some light touches on the paint, you will get a nice consistency and nice effect. So you can make reflections, shadows. This is exactly what I'm doing here on the little puffin. How cute is it? But don't use a liquid consistency at this stage because you will lift up the white below and it will make harsh edges and not exactly what you want for textures and shadows. Depending on the effect you want to achieve, you have to wait until the previous layer is dry or not. And sometimes it's better to be quick and to add the second layer with the first one not completely dry. Here it's what you don't want to do. I have left the green background to dry completely and now I'm trying to add some shadows with a dark paint, but this is creating really hard edges. To have a smooth transition between the colors and to make sure that everything is really blending well together. What you need to do is place your first layer and without waiting, and this is real time here, you will add on top of it the second color you want to blend into the first one, and this way it will be easier to do. You need to adjust the consistency as well. It's always slightly increasing the consistency from one layer to another. And sometimes you can even go deeper. Let's say that I'm placing the first layer of grasses here, so with some random brush strokes here and there. But I want this to be a bit blurry because this is in the background, and then I want to place a second layer of leaves and flowers. For this, what I want to do is grab my spray with tap water, protect the rest of the painting, and spray where I want the colors to fuse together. I know it's a bit scary, but believe me, it works very well. On the opposite, when you want your second layer or third layer, well, the top layer, to be completely opaque, you need to let the previous layer dry. Here my green layer is a bit wet and I'm trying to apply the white daisies, and really all I'm doing is lifting up the green under. And you can go on top as many times as you want. You will never get the white opacity until you let everything dry and build layers. But if I apply all the principles that I told you before, I let the green layer to dry, I'm using a thicker consistency of white, which is an opaque white. Then you can get the perfect petal white at the first time. Magical, isn't it? This is valid for any other colors, of course, not only white. Here for the yellow, I have mixed a tiny amount of the opaque white inside, so it gives more opacity to the yellow, which is a transparent color usually. And that's fine, we expect the yellow to be transparent. But if you want to have a very, very opaque layer, use a thick consistency, maybe let it dry, apply another layer of thick consistency on top of it, and you will get something really opaque, like here with the little flowers on the side that are really covering the dark green under. Here you see the two finished paintings side by side, and the one on the right is supposed to be the one that is not correctly done, and the one on the left is supposed to be the good one. You have to trust me on this. It was very difficult for me to do something wrong. Not that I want to brag, but I know how to do it. So painting the way it shouldn't be done is not very easy for me. But you get the idea.